Joining me tonight, Paul Henderson, veteran prosecutor and legal analyst. Also with us tonight, Dr. James Peterson, director of Africana Studies at Lehigh University and an MSNBC contributor. Gentlemen, good to have you with us tonight.
Thanks for having us, Ed.
Mr. Henderson, I'd like to get, I assume that you just saw the dash cam video. How do you think this plays into the case?
Well, I think it shows us that but for the videotape that we received that came outside of official means and came from the community, we still would not have the hard evidence and the extrinsic facts which show that there are lies, and it actually goes beyond the lies into perjury, where we have the claim being made by the officer that he was struggling, that he was in fear, or that anyone else was in fear. And so I think it's going to be helpful and it's going to be corroborative, but it doesn't show as much as the first videotape that we all saw from the day before, where we actually witnessed the entire incident playing out from the perspective of a third party.
Right now, it looks like a routine traffic stop. There's nothing inordinary about it from what the videotape shows. I mean, that's my first impression of this. There's been numerous reports about this officer's background, Mr. Henderson. How does that play into this whole scenario? It's
absolutely going to play a significant role on three different levels. Both in the criminal case, it's going to come in terms of the bad behavior that's been done by the officer. It's going to come in any civil case, and for the same thing, to say that the department should have had notice about his bad behavior. And then at a third level, it's going to be brought in as part of the analysis if a third party or the federal government comes in to review a pattern and practice of behavior from the police department, where they will be evaluating how other officers, and this officer specifically, was handled when there were allegations made against him. So you will see this evidence being used over and over and over again as we analyze just this incident that took place and the subsequent accountability.
You're going to see Scott run from the vehicle here in just a moment as the officer has gone back to the police vehicle. We can only assume that he's running a license plate of the vehicle. Mr. Henderson, does this video, the video that was recorded, there you see Scott opening the door. It's not like he's taken off right away.
Right.
And now he's going back into the car.
Right.
That's important because that shows intent, doesn't it?
It shows intent, and the thing to focus on is when are you allowed to use justifiable deadly force. And so what you're analyzing is when, if ever, do you see the officer in safety or in the zone of danger for either himself or of others, which would justify the use of deadly force. And so that's why I said this videotape will be used corroboratively to show that there is no evidence of that flashpoint taking place. There is no evidence anywhere of something showing that that officer was either in danger to justify the use of deadly force, either for himself or for the public.
Okay, I'm just going to put it in street terms here for just a moment, just folks talking on the street, okay? How in the hell could this police officer not know what has happened over the last year in Ferguson, Missouri, with Michael Brown, with Trayvon Martin, with the gentleman that was choked to death in New York City, Eric Garner? And I mean, this looked like a normal traffic stop. What elevated this guy, as you see it, Dr. Peterson, to bring it to the point where he would think that he should unload his pistol on an unarmed man running away from him? I mean, I mean, it would seem to me that every police officer in this country would get the message. Don't shoot unarmed people.
You would think, Ed, that would be the case, but at the top of the segment, you mentioned that this was a routine stop, and just from the ways in which we've had to cover these kinds of cases, it's seeming more and more routine that law enforcement are engaged in the shooting of unarmed civilians, that they have a particular script about scuffles and going for the gun or going for the taser and then fearing for their lives. And also this story shows us the limitations of dash cams. This is why I'm not a huge fan of body cameras or dash cams anyway, because the same type of law enforcement officer officer who would use deadly force on an unarmed civilian in the way that this officer did with Walter Scott is the same kind of officer who might manipulate the cameras or turn the cameras off. And so the kind of routine nature that you're talking about, Ed, I think filters into this entire discussion. Law enforcement folk are looking at cases like Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, and they're siding with law enforcement. They're saying that it's tough out there, it's dangerous out there, they have to protect themselves. And by the way, this is the narrative that they use every time in these shootings. We were just fortunate, and this family obviously was blessed to get access to this video so that we could actually have the truth in this particular case, and I think it explodes a lot of those previous narratives. But your common sense question, Ed, is going to continue to go unanswered, because I don't think that law enforcement has gotten the wake-up call just yet. I really don't. If you think about their defensive stances at some of these sort of sit-ins and die-ins and some of the organized ways in which Ferguson Action or Dream Defenders are trying to raise awareness around this, if you look at even their stance at Michael Brown's funeral in St. Louis, their sort of attitude, their positionality, they're still quite defensive. So we haven't had the kind of conversations that are going to lead to resolution and rebuilding the public's trust with law enforcement.
And finally, Mr. Henderson, the discrepancy between the police report and the videotape, your thoughts?
I think it's a real problem because, as I said before, it goes beyond mere lies. It drifts into an area of perjury, which is real accountability in terms of what this officer was willing to say. And then beyond that, what that report shows in terms of how CPR was administered to this individual, to Walter Scott, who had died. There was no CPR, and we saw that on the videotape. And that's going to speak directly to the analysis and the overview of the pattern and behavior of that entire area of what police were doing, because someone has to sign off on that police report before it gets filed. So it will extend beyond just the officer that's under arrest right now. That's
Paul
the
Henderson,
problem.
James Peterson, gentlemen, thanks for the conversation tonight. Appreciate your time.